He is powerful, he is dutiful, and most of all, he is obedient. Everything I tell him to do to keep him successful and powerful, he has done, no questions asked. He has never openly asked for anything from me. His obedience alone got him everything he needed and wanted. He paused. Unlike most of my children, he used his cigar and pointed at the House of Wade painting. He listens. So I granted him everything he could ever want or need, just like his father and just like his father's father. The Baron looked at Kinsey and Oshun's daughter. The Baron looked at Kinsey and said, Oshun's daughter, you may need to sit down and rest your legs. You got work in the morning. He scoffed at her. With that, he tapped his cane down and Mackenzie sat down next to a shocked-looking Jackson. Baron walked over to the painting that was uncovered and grabbed the stool that was in front of it and sat down in front of Jack and Kinsey. He put his cane between his legs and began to massage it up and down like it was a part of him, and looked at Kinsey and winked at her. He noticed the disgusted look on her face and laughed a hearty laugh and said, all right, all right. He threw his hands back and puffed his cigar a few times, then blew out the smoke. The smoke cloud was large. Mackenzie looked at the smoke cloud and noticed that the shape looked familiar to her. Too familiar. She nudged Jackson to look at the cloud, and Jackson looked back at Baron. Mackenzie whispered, Cameron, and looked at Baron. He tilted his hat to her and grinned with the cigar between his teeth. Kinsey and Jackson both looked at each other simultaneously. So, Baron said and tapped his cane 3 times. Cameron I have found is an exceptional young man and very different from his elders. He has attained much knowledge, more than a guy that would be the age of, say, thrice your great-grandfather, if you will. He said, waving his hand around with a cigar in it. He also has been able to access a very large amount of my powers. And the power he has harnessed, no human has ever been able to harness. He rose from his seat and started to pace. He is stronger than any of my children that has ever lived. He stopped and tapped his cane on the floor and said, in answer to your question, he paused and puffed the cigar a few more times. He blew out the massive amount of smoke. The smoke nearly swallowed the whole room. Both Kinsey and Jackson looked at each other again, then looked at the Baron. He nodded his head toward the smoke in front of them. It was forming into a scene. A house that looked very familiar to the two of them. Then the door opens. The scene changes into a large red room with a large black throne and a path that's leading to the throne in 4 ways. There are 14 steps that leads up to the seat of the throne on each path. Then a man appears on the throne. The more Kinsey focuses on the man's face, the more familiar he looks to her. Cameron, she shrieked. Cameron was dressed in a black suit and a crown made of bones sitting on top of his head. His shoes were gold and his left foot was resting atop of his right knee. His arms were sitting relaxed on both arms of the throne, with his right palm up. His palm had a small shiny orb in the center of it, light glistening out of it. People were lining up leading up to the throne, all with something in their hands. One by one, each person sat whatever they had in their hand on the table that was sitting on the right of the first step leading up to the throne. Once they do this, they go up the steps to the throne and kiss Cameron's hand that is palm up. When they kiss his hand, they vanish into particles of shining dust that is still holding the shape of the person that kissed his hand. Once this happens, they float off out into the room and further into the house. When Cameron turns his head and grabs the chalice of drinks from it, Jackson noticed that his skin was missing on the other side of his face. Jackson's eyebrows raised up and he yelled, "What the hell?" Then he looked at Kinsey, who was covering the bottom half of her face. Her eyes were red and filled with tears, but not a tear dropped. Jackson then looked at Baron, who was laughing, and said, "What the hell is right, my boy?" and laughed even louder and tapped his cane on the floor hard while laughing. The smoke cleared instantly. The Baron got up and said, "You see, Cameron, and I had a deal. If he could reach his peak of knowledge and power before he was 50 years of age, he would have to spend his nights working for me and his days doing whatever he pleased. The only catch is," he pointed his short cigar at them and said, "he will become immortal so he could forever serve me and be idolized in the spiritual realm." He then turned and paced again and stopped. He did have one stipulation, though. He tapped his cane on the floor again and holds his weight on it, leaning forward looking towards Mackenzie into her eyes. "If he is to become immortal, then so will his wife and child." He stopped. He side-eyed Jackson and said, "As well as his right-hand man, Jackson." And then he smirked at Jackson. He started pacing again and said, when you each turn the age of 43, even Jackie Lynn, your daughter, you will not age anymore after that." Mackenzie had so many questions that she could not even get out before Baron looked at her and said, "Don't worry, priestess of Babalu Ia. Your beloved will return to you at 5 a.m. your time. And he will look like himself when he returns." Jackson got up and helped Kenzie up as well. The Baron laughed and dropped a piece of the cigar that had been smoked up and stomped it out on the floor. He then looked at both of them and said, "Well," tilted his hat to each of them, and with that he vanished into nothing. Jackson and Mackenzie both looked at each other for what seemed to be 10 minutes. Then Jackson grabs Mackenzie by her hand and leads her up the steps. Halfway there, Mackenzie stopped walking and shook Jackson's hand off hers and pointed her pinky finger in his face and squinted her right eye. "Your fucking brother has some fucking explaining to do when he bring his ass back here." She pointed at the floor. Then she dusted herself off, shook her button-length braids, and put them up in a bun. "He got me out here looking and acting crazy and shit." She threw her hands up. "What if Jack was here, huh?" She shook her head. "What the fuck is wrong with him not telling me some shit like this? Some fucking life or death or whatever the fuck type shit the fuck is?" She yelled. She turned around and looked at the painting and yelled, "And boy, you better hope that I'm still fucking here when you get the fuck back." Jackson tried to grab her hand and she shook him off. "Nah, man," and pointed her pinky in his face and gritted her teeth. "And you motherfucker, you better. I'm sorry. It's funny to me. She gritted her teeth, "And motherfucker, you know better keeping shit like this from me. You are damn lucky that I don't slap the fucking shit out of you right the fuck where you stand." And with that, she pulled her robe up above her ankles and proceeded to walk up the rest of the way of the stairs into the kitchen. Once in the kitchen, she went into the liquor cabinet and grabbed another bottle of her husband's expensive rum and chugged it halfway down. Jackson slowly walks up the stairs and looks at Mackenzie looking confused. He says, "Sis, I really didn't know." When he reached the kitchen and took one step away from the threshold, the door slammed shut. Kenzie looked at the door and threw the half-filled bottle of rum at it, shattering it, spraying rum and glass all over the doorway and the floor. Jackson backs away with his hands up because she has her gun pointed at him. He put his hands down once he saw the tears starting to finally fall from her eyes, and her hands were shaking. She puts the gun in the sink and runs and punches Jackson in the chin, knocking him out cold. She then walks to the freezer, grabs the ice bucket, and went to get 2 towels. She filled both towels up with ice and put one towel by Jackson's head on the floor. She then stepped over Jackson, puts the ice on her hand, and goes upstairs to their bedroom and slams the door shut. When Kenzie sits on the side of her bed, she screams until her throat and lungs burned. After she let it out, she caught her breath and sat in a lotus position in the middle of the floor to pray. Once she prayed, she got up in her bed and went to sleep. She could not wait to see her husband and she couldn't wait for her husband to see his brother passed out on the floor and the scene before him before he has to see her. But for now, she's going to get some rest. She has a meeting in the morning. And that's it. The end. What do y'all think? I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope y'all liked it. It was fun with me even writing it and thinking about all these scenarios and stuff. I did get a little frustrated toward the end, but we got through it. It's over. So tell me what y'all think in the comments. You can like, you can share, you can just keep watching over and over if you want to. It's free out here in YouTube land now. Thank y'all for watching, and until next time, see you later.